behind us as it rolled shut. Even as visitors, we had the sense that we are now in captivity. Inside these walls at the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary is Dr. Mutulu Shakur. He pioneered the use of acupuncture in the treatment of addiction during the drug plague that swept in and took on epidemic proportions during the escalation of the Vietnam War after 1965. Hardest hit were the black and Latin communities. Among the worst was the South Bronx, where young people literally were lying in the street from the effects of drugs. The problem of how to fight this new scourge was on the minds of every organizer. Mutulu Shakur was part of a movement that included the Black Panthers, the Young Lords, and the Republic of New Africa that had taken over the Lincoln Hospital demanding drug detoxification programs for the South Bronx. The takeover led to the formation of Lincoln Detox, where these pioneering treatments were developed as an alternative to government-sponsored programs that pushed methadone, an equally addictive synthetic drug used as a substitute for heroin, as the solution. Mutulu Shakur has been behind these bars for the last 13 years. As he sat down on the table across from us, he took out a clipping from his folder with a picture of slain rap artist Tupac Shakur. "This is my son," he said. With this very personal comment, Mutulu began to unfold the story of a struggle for social activism and alternative medicine, particularly acupuncture, as a method for fighting the drug epidemic, and how doing this pitted them against the whole government establishment. Those were tumultuous times. There were protests and rebellions and repression amidst the steady drumbeat of the body bags coming back from Vietnam. Funerals occurred in the black and Latin and Native American communities with far greater frequency than elsewhere. Many in the black and Latin community felt they were the victims of an undeclared war, something called COINTELPRO, short for the counterintelligence program of the FBI and the big city police departments. Many leaders were cut down in the midst of critical struggles by the police or assassins' bullets, from Reverend Martin Luther King to Malcolm X to Fred Hampton and so many others. The drugs flooded in everywhere, relentlessly, from campuses to the community, particularly after protests or unrest. And so many were jailed. Many were to remain in those prisons for decades. Prison population began to skyrocket, so that today there are 5 times as many prisoners as 3 decades ago. Organizers in the community, like Mutulu Shakur, saw this as an effort to criminalize and destroy a generation of youth, rebellious youth, a plague brought on by the establishment that saw getting people high as the answer to the conditions of poverty and the weekly death toll from the war that had people seething with anger in the late 1960s and early 70s.
We were able to demonstrate that social and political activity, along with acupuncture, would help detoxify people off of drugs quicker than just.
Lincoln Detox had become the center of that movement to fight drugs with acupuncture and the struggle for social justice.
Yeah, and that's my favorite line of work, healing. I think I do that better than I do anything else.
So, could you tell our audience a little bit about your history as a political activist, as a revolutionary? You know, just give us a brief overview of who you are and really why you're here in the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary.
That's a two-pronged question. Why am I here in Atlanta Federal Penitentiary is a long story about the treatment of political prisoners and prisoners of war within the context of U.S. prison system in particular. Who I am, I believe, reflects their attitude towards me. I think that I am considered a part of the new African independence movement. And that movement recruited me at the age of 15. I was involved with a man in a community called South Jamaica, Queens. And I think that anybody who knows anything about New York knows that South Jamaica, Queens is considered a middle-class black neighborhood. And the most interesting thing about that neighborhood was that all of the people in the 60s, late 50s, who had responsibility for the broad community, for the extended family in our community, the teachers, the nurses, the principals, the cops even, the firemen, were all very race-conscious people. So we came from a community that had Sekou Odinga, who had Asada Shakur, who had Herman Ferguson. Mm-hmm. So we grew up in a very race-conscious time. And at the time that I was 13 or 14, I became a son of a man by Abdul Shakur, Saladin Abdul Shakur. And he was the father. Actually, I was 12. He was the father of Lumumba Shakur and Zaid Shakur. For those people who don't know who Lumumba Shakur is, the famous Panther 21 case was Lumumba Shakur et al., and that was my brother. And Zaid Shakur was the comrade who was killed when Asada Shakur was captured on the New Jersey Turnpike. Both of them their father took me in. I have no biological father. I mean, I must have a biological father, but I have no father in that respect. And I became a part of that family at the age of 11 and 12. And so we were all very conscious people. And Herman Ferguson was the principal of the school in which, one of the important schools in the community that allowed for us to read and understand our history, understand community control. He was a very influential in the Southeast Queens Community Corporation, Jamaica Community Corporation. These are organizations that took care of the fundamental needs of the community. And so he took me in as my political father. So I had great mentors during my very, very early age. I didn't always do what they said, but I was always dependent on them for guidance, and I knew that when in doubt, they had the direction. And so at the age of 15, I went to the Corps under Sonny Carson when he was at the South, when they were in the Ocean Hill, Brownsville, the School for Common Sense. So, and Sonny Carson was my street father. He was like someone who knew the streets, who was in Brooklyn. And so we always, had that kind of surrounding. So I was recruited essentially into the Black Liberation Movement through these men. And I believe that that's what put me in the position I am today. And that is that I feel good about myself. I feel that I have dedicated my life to a worthy cause. I think that there must be place in the world for dreamers, and I'm a dreamer. And I think that the dreamers are the people who put into the reality what we wish could happen, because they fight for it. And I think that the new African independence movement, through these men, have advanced and has stayed strong for a long period of time. And it's our time to take over. Now I'm almost 50, and so we're looking to the youth to take over from where we are. But that's where I came from as a child. The Republic of New Africa is the organization that I joined at the age of 17. While my brothers joined the Black Panther Party, I after going to Newark and Philadelphia for the Black Power Convention, was quite impressed with, you might know him as Milton Henry, but Brother Gaidi. Milton Henry was the man that was with Malcolm X when he went abroad to organize the strategy of putting the issue of black people before the United Nations at the same time, or part of the proposed anti-apartheid proposal that was being backed by the various governments that was backing ANC for making apartheid a international crime. And so the strategy to put black people's plight before the United Nations was helped develop through a man by the name of Milton Henry, who was an attorney out of Detroit, to us known as Brother Gaidi. And Brother Gaidi and his brother Imari Obadeli, who is the president